So the Champions League hit. We knew it was going to hit. We knew the league, the way this whole system was going to work is the league stage was going to give us like 5-6 match days of confusion and nobody knows what's happening and maybe a couple of big top of the billing matchups. And then all of a sudden on the last 2 match days, shit's going to hit the fan and there's going to be a bunch of wild, dramatic moments. I already made an entire video about the Benfica match, Real Madrid and all that. So I'm going to mention it again in this video. We're going to run down all the scores, I'm going to tell you what happened, what you might have missed, everything that was going on simultaneously. But I am going to skim over that match a little bit because I have already talked about it, right? That which I feel like makes sense. I feel like you're going to forgive me for that. But here's a little refresher on where we were entering today, right? Like entering the day of reckoning. This was the situation for all of the teams. A lot of teams down here with 6 points in a dream. Something I absolutely love is that you got 5 teams down here with 6 points. Only one of them ended on 6 points, right? There's a lot of teams that jumped up and put pressure on that playoff line right here. The only team that did end up on 6 points, though, was Ajax. They ended up losing to Olympiacos after consecutive wins, pulled them off the bottom of the table, and somehow, the whole mathematically alive became actually kind of alive. They ended up losing Olympiacos. This is a very necessary result for them, too. People focusing on Ajax because of the bigger name, typically. But if Olympiacos does not win this game, they're out. Marseille's in the final table. So this was very, very huge. A draw, I just want to check here, but a draw is absolutely not enough for them in this case either. And Olympiacos didn't take the lead until the 79th minute. They were in the lead originally before Kasper Dolberg equalized in a penalty, but 79th minute, on the road, holy shit, right? Like 79th minute, you're in Amsterdam, they're playing for their Champions League life. Ajax knows they need to win and have a lot of help, which they wouldn't have gotten. Even if Ajax had won, they wouldn't have gone through. But for Olympiacos, the flag-carrying team of the Greeks is going to get a shot at a real European giant in the Champions League knockouts. They have made the 24-team Champions League playoff thanks to that, 79th minute goal that has put them there. In my opinion, the most slept on match maybe in the entirety of the round, because Olympiacos is a team that it's an upset for them to get into the top 24. They might not believe that in their mindset, but the Greek league has bounced off the mat. And obviously Olympiacos won a European Trophy Conference League level a couple years ago. But to be able to go out in the Champions League and get the results necessary they ended up on 11 points, right? To be able to go out there and get the results necessary to just bound into the playoff. Real Madrid's in the damn playoff. Right, they're in the same, I've gone into the same round as Real Madrid. I think not even as much of the fact that who they are and getting into that round. This was a slept-on match because it was a match that Olympiacos needed to win. And they went out and actually got the result. And that goal in the 79th minute is what condemned Marseille, right? And they played their way in to that point. It's a huge win for them. I'm sure Marinakis is celebrating somewhere, doing something. Arsenal wins 3-2 against Kairat Almaty. This is actually a great result for Kairat Almaty, right? They tied it up in the 7th minute on a penalty. They scored late to make it 3-2. This was all house money. Kairat Almaty battled to get into this Champions League stage. They won a penalty shootout right at the end of those playoffs in order to get to this level. It's the first time they've ever been here. They're a Kazakh club, so it's not even just the first time they've ever been here. It's the first time that a team from their league has really been able to get to this stage. Astana made some good European runs. I don't think they ever made a Champions League group stage, though. I think they got Europa League a couple times. But Kairat Almaty got to nauseating heights. They've got a couple of kids that are considered as having a real shot at being legitimate European talents, going into top 5 leagues, being able to make a huge career out of playing really top-level football. And this is maybe the beginning of some sort of emergence of Kazakh football, at least getting completely out of the basement and becoming more competitive. Maybe something like a Georgia, where you get a Kvisha Kvaratskhelia, you get a Makatadze, you get a couple of guys that can go into, right, you get a couple of guys that can go into bigger leagues. If you're wondering if I made up that second Georgian guy's name, I did. There's a goalkeeper whose last name is somewhere in that ballpark, but I can't fucking remember it to save my life. You guys probably know it. Anyways, Arsenal won. They had a perfect record. They took care of business in that. It was one of the most unimportant matches that you could have. That brings us to Athletic Bilbao and Sporting. These are two teams that were in different battles. Athletic Club was in 23rd going into this match. Very uncomfortable position to be. right? A draw, given the number of teams that can reach 9 points, is perilous. So you're looking at, well, we need to win, right? We're going to need to go and win this match. Well, on the flip side, Sporting is playing for a top 8. They've guaranteed playoffs, right? They have a chance to not have to play. If they win, they're on 16 points, right? And we know Real Madrid lost because I already did a whole video about Benfica, Real Madrid. So Sporting's a team that if they win, they could jump over those teams in front of them, obviously. And this started, Bilbao was feeling great. Oyan Sanset scored in the 3rd minute. Bilbao was all over, like just out of the gate. But Sporting took a deep breath. The crazy, like, first 30 minutes, big chances both ways. Ousmane Diomande, the wonder kid center back, scored to equalize. And then Athletic Club scored again. Athletic Club went up 2-1. Then they were able to carry that 2-1 lead into the half. So, like, at halftime, Athletic Club's at 11 points, which it was a guarantee. They controlled their own destiny. They win, they're in. Right, like, if they win this match, there isn't a soul in heaven or hell that's going to be able to keep them out of the playoffs. The problem is Sporting just like chose violence. Beautiful goal by Trincao, who's rocking a ferocious mustache these days. Kind of a tiki-taka, slowed down version of that Arsenal goal that's considered the most beautiful goal of all time in terms of the passing play. This was just a triangle kind of, and all of a sudden they just went right through the middle of the team. Trincao tucks it into the corner and we're, tied up. And then you take it all the way down here and Sporting wins. Now, why was Sporting able to actually get this goal right at the end, which was a very important goal for a lot of teams, but wasn't actually that important for Athletic Club. Because Athletic Club, Bilbao needed to win. They needed to win. By the time we got particularly late in the match, everybody knew they needed to win in order to get into the knockouts. And so they're pushing the numbers forward. They get caught on this huge counter. Luis Suarez, not that Luis Suarez, different one, gets in on goal, somehow bricks the chance. It bounces out to Alisson Santos, who finds the bottom of the corner anyways. At that point, the match was already over, right? Bilbao had a couple of looks. Sporting had a couple of looks. This was not a match that felt like Athletic Club was blowing them away. But you see Sporting, it's actually higher than I even thought it was. 65% possession for Sporting in this match. It's a disappointing result for Athletic Club. And it shows, again, those Spanish teams that aren't in the top 3 really struggle to compete at this level. I mean, look at Villarreal's not even in the fucking conversation on this final match day. But that goal for Sporting takes them from 14 to 16 points. So if you're looking for the reason that Real Madrid is not in the top 8, it's that Sporting goal. It's Alisson Santos. I mean, besides the fact that they went and lost to Benfica, right? But Sporting scoring in the 94th minute sends them up to 16 points. Sporting's one of the best 8 teams in Europe, according to the competitive field this year. They won 5 of their 8 matches. And they have a bye. Sporting will be a seeded team with a bye straight into the round of 16. Right, look at every other team that's managed to make it to that point. We're going to review, obviously, all of the results. Sporting's in that conversation. Don't see no Benfica and Porto up there. You know what I mean? Another hugely overlooked storyline. I almost made an entire video out of this particular story, this particular run. This Bodo Glimt. Bodo Glimt had they had an amazing run in the Europa League. They got to the semifinal last year. They booked a Champions League stage spot this time. First time ever, right? For a club that less than 10 years ago was bouncing around in the lower leagues of Norway, right? Like they've come out of nowhere brilliantly to be who they are and to be accomplishing what they're doing. And then, of course, in the last Champions League match day, they somehow beat Manchester City. They'd had a really rough time up to this point. They'd only had 3 points, 3 draws to get to those 3 points. And then they finally got their Champions League win. They got it against Manchester City. It was fun. It was a feel-good story. But I said after that happened, we're looking at this table. You go, well, Bodo Glimt's still just only on 6 points. I mean, it's great that they won against Manchester City, but I think I said essentially, I don't think it's going to matter. It doesn't matter unless they can go and beat Atletico Madrid too. Well, you can see from the score that I have pulled up, they went and beat Atletico Madrid. Now, Bodo Glimt, in the first 5 to 10 minutes of this game, should have scored. They probably should have scored 2. They definitely had the chances to score 2, and you wouldn't have been like, wow, they really stole that one. And then Atletico Madrid woke up. Atletico Madrid ambushed them. They were all over them. They scored a barely offside goal. And then Sorloth, who's Norwegian, ironically enough, scored to make it 1-0. In Bodo Glimt, it looked like, well, they're finally dead. And they spent the rest of the half, or most of the rest of the half, with Atletico Madrid down their throat. They were gargling Atletico Madrid. And then all of a sudden, Bodo Glimt scores. Right? It was one of those matches where Bodo Glimt clearly caught Atletico Madrid asleep at the start. Atletico Madrid takes control of the match. They're getting chances left, right, and center. And then Bodo Glimt finds a goal, and everybody goes, wait, how the fuck is this match 1-1? Right? Bodo Glimt, when they play at home, they actually go and beat people. They're not very good on the road. They struggle on the road. They don't have a ton of experience in matches like this, and especially, in the Champions League and hearing the anthem and facing this type of crowd. Hell, look at the size of the city in Norway. You know what I mean? Like the stadiums they're playing in, it got more people than the entire city that these guys live in while they're playing for this team. You know what I mean? It is new. It is intense. There just isn't what you see from inexperienced teams in terms of the atmosphere, the environment, the intensity is inconsistency. That's what you get from Bodo Glimt. But in this instance, they bent and bent and bent. They did not break. Like Atletico Madrid had a lot of chances. I don't know what the XG numbers were. They had 27 shots. Right? Like there was a lot of just ball around the goal. Keeper had 7 saves. Just the ball in from the side, headers just wide. Like a lot of that. Headers just over the bar from Julian Alvarez again. And that continued in the second half until all of a sudden Bodo Glimt scored again. This was an embarrassing result for Atletico Madrid. And if you want to know a particularly painful fact, I believe if Atletico Madrid had been able to actually go win this match, they had a chance. They did obviously have a chance because their goal difference would have been, +4. If they'd actually gone and beaten Bodo Glimt, 4-5-1, which they absolutely could have done, they would have been in the top 8. That was what was on the table. As things stand, they would have actually managed to finish in 9th, but they would have finished ahead of Real Madrid. So, a fact that I'm sure they would have taken great joy in. But there was something to play for here for Atletico Madrid. If you didn't have all these teams win, if you didn't have, Sporting scoring that last second goal, Atletico Madrid would have been in the top 8 if they'd managed to win this match at home against a team that just doesn't win on the road. But a team that just hasn't proven they can compete on the road. But they did. And they got the result. And they got out. Bodo Glimt entered match day 7 with 3 points and 2 matches left against Manchester City at home and Atletico Madrid away. They got 6 points and managed to qualify for the playoff. They sneak in at 23rd. Thanks to, the goal difference, obviously, being just on the right side here, which having 3 draws helps with that because they only suffered 3 defeats in the entire competition. But they didn't have a win. And they came down and beat. It's one of those situations where you look at it and you go, well, mathematically, Bodo Glimt still has a chance. But is it really? It's not possible. This is a team of destiny every year. I love watching them play because I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, but they're going to show me some quality. They're going to show me something. And I'll be damned if it's not impressive to do what they've just done. To finish ahead of, there are big teams, not even just Marseille, from Power 5 leagues, Athletic Club, that have missed the top 24. And Bodo Glimt has played its way in there out of nowhere. They had 2 draws and 3 losses in their first 5 matches. They drew Dortmund, beat City, beat Atletico Madrid from the Arctic Circle. It's an amazing story. I probably should have made an entire video about it, but I didn't. In the realm of normalcy, where normal shit was happening, Barcelona managed to win 4-1 against Copenhagen. The abnormal part of it, of course, is Copenhagen took a very early lead, which had everybody questioning their sanity. But eventually, Barcelona got the ball rolling down the hill, ended up with 4 second-half goals that made this rather comfortable. This was a win Barcelona needed to get a top 8 finish. But, again, in the realm of normalcy, they were able to beat Copenhagen, which is what they should be doing in order to finish in the top 8. Copenhagen, they finish on 8 points. They were going into the day right on the line, but we knew they were playing Barcelona, so we knew it was going to be tough for them to get, if they were going to get a point, they would still need serious help. it would, if they had drawn Barcelona, they still would have been eliminated, and that would have been incredibly hard. So maybe it's good for their own sanity that they didn't do that. Shout out to Bayer Leverkusen for delivering a very round and impressive performance. American Malik Tillman had 2 first-half goals for Leverkusen. They were in a danger area. They were actually behind a team that ended up being eliminated in Marseille, who we're going to talk about later. This win vaults them up to 12 points, and they're feeling great. Villarreal was, of course, already eliminated, and Athletic Club and Villarreal, the 2 Spanish teams that are not part of the big 3, are torpedoed. Villarreal finishing with 1 point, Athletic Club finishing on 8 points. Between them, a combined 2 wins in 16 Champions League matches for the 2 not duo Madrid or Barcelona teams from Spain. It's a bad look for La Liga, and this is just the completion of a very, very very miserable campaign for the Yellow Submarine. They had literally no fun. Benfica 4-2 over Real Madrid. Watch the whole video I made about this match. Incredible storylines. Goalkeeper goal at the end to send Benfica through as the 24th team to eliminate Marseille. Now, this game, embarrassing. Am I going to feel bad for Marseille? No. Mason Greenwood's not playing Champions League knockouts. He's got more free time to beat up women. Good for him, right? Club Brugge were not the better team in this game. They weren't. Club Brugge won this match on vibes and look, Marseille had a good number of shots, a good number of chances in this match. Club Brugge tactically ambushed them in the first 11 minutes. First 2 chances, just boom, boom. Gut punch, shot to the jaw. Right, Marseille just went straight down to the mat. Now, they were basically the highest team that was in any real jeopardy here. 0 goal difference, 9 points coming into this. Former champions of the entire thing, by the way. Right, the type of club that should be going through. Right, there's 24 teams going through. Marseille absolutely should be one of them. Club Brugge, on the other hand, started this day on 7 points. So, I was talking about with Sun Tzu earlier, they knew they needed to win. They knew they had to go out there and win a match if anything good was going to happen. They went out there and won. The 2 goals and then just a tidal wave of chances for Marseille and then a 3rd goal. Chaos, ball bouncing around the box, kicks out to Stankovic. He had a couple of these shots in this match where he was arriving in the box late and just mollywopped it into the bottom corner. Now, maybe the cruel thing here for Marseille, and I realize Marseille has a lot of fans and a lot of players that aren't Mason Greenwood. I just get my jab in while I can, making sure that that's top of the menu anytime we're thinking about him. But my boy Timmy Weah is on that team, the American winger. I've always loved him. And the Marseille fans generally are great when I've interacted with them. If they don't concede that goal, they go through. Same goal difference as Benfica, more goals for. They would have had 1 more goal for. Also, shout out to the fact that Benfica scored 4 of its 10 Champions League goals throughout the entire league phase against Real Madrid. Marseille lost 3-0 to Liverpool, 3-0 to Club Brugge. If they'd forfeited both matches, they would have been able to accomplish the same thing. Right? This is a monumental meltdown. If they had managed to not concede any one of those 6 goals, they would be in the knockouts. They have gone crashing out. And if you're a Marseille fan, you should be livid. Right? You should be very, very upset. This is an unacceptable plummet out of the standings. Whatever the opposite of a killer instinct is, Marseille displayed that with real gumption. They put it on full display, a complete lack of a killer instinct, and just went flying out of the standings. Flying. While Club Brugge vaults itself all the way up to 19th. They jump ahead of Monaco, Galatasaray, ahead of Bodo Glimt, ahead of Benfica. Club Brugge, the only Belgian team that was able to get to this point, and they're hot. They were in European knockouts last year. They were a burgeoning European dark horse that can pick off teams like Marseille with regularity. And they were at home and they delivered. Absolutely delivered I would say their perfect match. And Marseille, there's nothing else for me to add other than you can't let that happen. If you're as good as Marseille thinks they are and you're challenging PSG and whatever, you cannot let that happen. It can't happen. Inter and Dortmund, mutually assured destruction here. Inter had no chance to go into the top. Dortmund didn't either. This was all about seeding between whether you're a seeded or unseeded team in the playoff draw. Dortmund plummets to being an unseeded team in the playoff draw with a 2-0 loss. Inter jumps into being a seeded team with a 2-0 win. So these two teams will be in the Champions League knockouts. There was not a lot of jeopardy in either direction with that. Pretty solid win here for Tottenham. Not easy to go to Eintracht Frankfurt and win. Eintracht Frankfurt had already been eliminated. Very disappointing European campaign for them. But this win for Tottenham secures that top 8 position, which is a pretty remarkable run for the Premier League teams, and considering 5 of the 8 top 8 positions go to Premier League teams, which kind of ties back to that video that I made, I think it was yesterday, about how the Premier League teams, just the amount of money and the amount of influence they're able to wield. Tottenham not having a great year in the Prem. Pretty smooth sailing into the top 8. About as smooth as you could possibly hope to be able to coast into that top 8 finish. They finished with 17 points. They only lost 1 of the 8 matches they played, in the Champions League. Of course, Juventus also only lost 1 match and they're down in 13th, but that's just because I guess they hate fun. A crash back down to earth for Qarabag. They got the fun experience of playing in Anfield and the unfun experience of being beat 6-0. Mo Salah back on the score sheet. Qarabag is still in the last 24. Every seeded team is going to be begging to play Qarabag in that round. They've done unbelievably well. Somebody hire their manager and their data department immediately. To get to this point, they have squeezed the juice out of a rock here to get 3 wins and a draw out of this league stage. They have embarrassed all of the teams behind them that would consider themselves way bigger than Qarabag. But I think when the rubber meets the road, as this Liverpool match has seemingly shown, they're not actually that good relative, particularly to the teams that they're going to be playing in the next round, which is Real Madrid, Inter, PSG, Newcastle, Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Atalanta, or Bayer Leverkusen, right, who snuck into the top 16 with their win. All of those teams are going to be, like 3-4 goal favorite over 2 legs against Qarabag. They're going to have a fun away day in Azerbaijan, and it's a huge achievement for them. I'm not trying to diss them or anything. They've earned the right to be there. That's what happens when you squeeze juice out of a stone. When you get absolutely every ounce out of your team possible, you earn the right to be there. You do something that you didn't really think was possible. Liverpool, meanwhile, clinches top 8 with that win. Manchester City beats Galatasaray 2-0. Necessary win to give themselves a chance at the top 8. They end up grabbing the last spot because of results elsewhere. Galatasaray didn't have a ton to play for. That also helps. They just had seeding considerations, so they are now an unseeded team after this loss. But even if they did have a ton to play for, it's kind of hard to go to Manchester City and get a good result. Bit of odd parity going on in Monaco and Juventus. Juventus loves a draw. They drew 4 of their 8 matches, 0-0 in the Principality. But if Monaco had conceded a goal, Marseille would actually be back in. That was an interesting point here for me. Monaco started the day on 9 points. They started the day on 9 points. They were right here in 21st. They had a bad goal difference at -6 because they caught the hands from Manchester City. So the draw puts them at 10. If they had lost or they lost, they would have been at 9. Obviously, they would have absolutely been barbecued. But they drew. That was it. A nice snoozer. Really a match that I didn't click over to once, I don't think. Monaco apparently winning the XG battle. Juventus not mustering a shot. So it doesn't seem as though Monaco was on the nervous side, but instead trying to actually score a goal that would have been able to launch them further up the table and, make them a lot more comfortable than I'm sure they were down the stretch. Then there's Napoli hosting Chelsea. Speaking of big teams that failed to make the 24, Antonio Conte delivers another Champions League masterclass and gets beaten by his old team. For Napoli, this was a particularly heartbreaking match. At home, big brands, Napoli coming off their surprise title in Italy, right? Like this is, they've been playing with fire the whole time. And we've been waiting. Every time we break down the Champions League, we have been waiting and waiting for Napoli to, they just won 1 or 2 in a row, and now they're finally safe. And they were never safe. And now it was a situation, if you lose to Chelsea, you're probably not going to be in a good spot. And in fact, even if they had drawn, they wouldn't have made it. They needed a win. They played Benfica away, Copenhagen away, and then at home against Chelsea, they got 1 point from those last 3 matches. They needed 3 points. They needed to win one of those matches. They did not find a win. Now, this was a comeback by Chelsea. It was 2-1. Rasmus Højlund with a pretty sharp striker's goal to put Napoli in front. Beautiful goal by Vergara. He's, Sofia Vergara's brother, I can only assume, with a beautiful spinning play inside the box, tucking it into the bottom corner. But João Pedro scored a certified banger and another one in the 82nd minute to condemn Napoli to elimination. Meanwhile, Chelsea, with all the Premier League teams up here, qualifies for the top 8. Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea, City, and Arsenal up at the top. That's 5 Premier League teams in the top 8. Now you know how each one of them got there. But Chelsea, finished strong. They delivered back-to-back wins. They won their match against Pafos, which, if you look at the next result, not as easy as you'd think. Pafos was one of those teams that entered the final day on 6 points. They needed a big win against Slavia Prague. They got it. Demolition. Their first goal was an absolute beauty, like 30-yard strike from Vlad Dragomir, briefly equalized by Sparta Prague, but on the flip side of the half, they got it back. Then a red card for Sparta Prague opened things up for a couple more goals for Pafos. Unfortunately for Pafos, the goal difference mountain was too hard for them to overcome. Even with these goals, they ended up on a -3. Now, what's pretty remarkable is if, let's say, Benfica doesn't score with their goalkeeper in the 98th minute, and Pafos wins 5-1, if they find one more goal, Pafos would have grabbed the last spot. They would have eliminated Benfica and Marseille right on that goal difference. So I'm sure the ending to this match was frantic, right? Pafos flying around trying to get that one more goal they believed they needed. But just the same as Qarabag, who finished, 1 point higher than Pafos with a worse goal difference, it must be noted. This is an incredible result for Pafos. They have finished tied on points with Marseille, ahead of PSV, Bilbao, Napoli, Copenhagen, Ajax, Eintracht Frankfurt, and Villarreal. Slavia Prague and Kairat Almaty as well. But they have finished in 26 out of 36 teams in their first ever Champions League stage, in a very rare Champions League appearance from a Cypriot side in general. Then they finished with a 4-1 win against the best team in the Czech Republic. They were I expected Kairat Almaty and Pafos to be sharing this. I expected them to be holding hands. That was the expectation. This Pafos team was way better than anybody thought they would be. And they delivered a rapturous final performance that gave them every chance of backdooring a playoff position, which is truly remarkable. PSG against Newcastle. Very fun match. Mutually assured destruction. One of these teams needed to win to make the top 8, so neither of them did. Looked like PSG was going to be all over them early, right? Newcastle on the road. PSG gets a great save by Pope on a penalty from Dembele. Then Vitinha from outside the box 4 minutes later. And it just felt like PSG was going to run away with it. But then Newcastle parks the bus, weathers the storm, finds a crap goal right before, just battles a goal in right before the half. And it's 1-1. And I'll be honest, in the second half, Newcastle had a couple of looks at this. Their tactic worked. They caught PSG's attack, and they countered effectively, Anthony Gordon particularly. Newcastle had a chance for sure to win this match in the second half with the chances they created. If they had won, they would have bumped Man City out of the top 8, and they would have taken a top 8 spot for themselves if either of these teams had managed to win. So, I mean, you have 6 Premier League teams in the top 12 of the Champions League. You've got the worst of apparently 6 Premier League teams dueling PSG. Obviously, PSG was better. If you watch the match, you'd know that. Right, but Newcastle was able to duel them, go on the road, and like a very workman result from Newcastle. They'll be a seeded team in the knockouts. Obviously, going to be very exciting for their fans. PSV needed a win against Bayern Munich. It was not forthcoming. Musiala scored in the 58th minute before hope was restored by the Moroccan Ismail Saibiri. But unfortunately, Ismail Saibiri's goal was then followed up by Harry Kane doing what Harry Kane always fucking does. He scores goals. Bayern Munich was already guaranteed through, so they didn't have a lot to play for in this match, while PSV needed something. It is worth mentioning, though, that little yo-yo act that happened in the second half of this match had everybody sweating this line, because a draw would put PSV in because the goal difference would be +1, obviously, in that situation. That would put them well ahead of Bodo Glimt and Benfica on the 9-point line, which it would have bumped Benfica out. That goal wouldn't have mattered at all if Harry Kane hadn't scored in the 84th minute to knock PSV out. So that's a team that was above the line, but was considered by me kind of dead in the water because they had to deal with Bayern Munich in the final match day. And again, that's just order being restored, right? This is just things making sense where PSV gave it a brave go, but they're playing Bayern Munich. And then the final match, which was another interesting, spicy one, another one of those teams on 6 points, RUSG out of Belgium, right? They beat Atalanta, who, if Atalanta had been able to go in and win this match, they had a chance at the top 8. They didn't do it. Okay, the goal came 70th minute, so plenty of drama here. Right, Atalanta manages to hold on to a top spot up here, but if they'd won, they would have been on 16 points, which had every chance to go to the top 8. The problem for RUSG is their goal difference was so bad. They needed help. They needed Benfica to lose. They needed Bodo Glimt to lose. They needed Club Brugge to lose. Right? Like, they needed teams to lose that did not lose. They needed a lot of help, but I give them a ton of credit for adding to the parity of the final day and for winning the match against Atalanta and giving themselves a chance. And again, for a team like RUSG, which this is also their first Champions League group stage, league stage they've ever made it to, 3 wins is a tremendous performance for them. You get over $10 million for that combined fee just for the 3 wins. That's on top of obviously all the television money and whatever else is coming to you from the Champions League. That makes a big difference at Royal Union Saint-Gilloise. Right, and they feel a lot like Club Brugge of a couple of years ago, where I would not be surprised if they were back, and they were back stronger. But the final setup has Arsenal, Bayern, Liverpool, Tottenham, Barca, Chelsea, Sporting, and Manchester City as the seeded bye teams. The seeded playoff teams, Real Madrid, Inter, PSG, Newcastle, Juventus, Atletico Madrid, Atalanta, and Bayer Leverkusen, sliding up to that 16th spot. The unseeded teams, Dortmund, the team you probably don't want to draw, Olympiacos, Club Brugge, Galatasaray, Monaco, Qarabag, Bodo Glimt, and Benfica. Very impressive, the variety of leagues, the variety of perceived talent levels that we have, particularly in this 17 to 24 spot, that have managed to make it through. And I think the Champions League has delivered us plenty of parity. There's a lot of teams in here that, people would not be able to find on a map, or at least would have thought would be blown out against some of the teams they managed to go out there and beat. That's a beautiful thing about the way this Champions League is set up.